in case you didn't notice, Carolina beat the Falcons. So your Detroit Lions, I've never seen anything like this before. Your Detroit Lions, despite the fact they have the worst record in the NFC, are now just 2 games out of the wild card spot by virtue of the Falcons' loss. And my son goes to me, he said, well, Dad, the math says they're only 2 games out of the wild card spot.
Well, that was the case before the game.
You ready for the playoff push?
Playoffs?
I pushed for it earlier this week, and you made fun of me.
And I'm going to make fun of anybody that talks about it here, too.
I think you're raising your son correctly.
What's that?
I think you're raising your son incorrectly.
Hey, Adam, all I can do is share with them my thoughts, which are, and I posed the question to him, because I saw it going around the shows here at Woodward. We never really got into it much. I gave him the question, do you want Will Anderson or do you want this team to go to the playoffs? That's it. It's cut and dry.
It's a simple question. It's a very easy answer.
100%?
I made the case, and I don't know how you feel about this, Neil or Terry. I made the case that if they were 8-9 in some mystical faraway land, which is not going to happen, by the way, that you could live with it, because now you're not going into your third year thinking about firing your head coach, right? You don't want to have to always start over and start over and start over. But what would happen is, well, that Rams pick is probably going to be somewhere between 10 and 16. Yeah, I think they will recover a little bit. Having said that, you have a GM that's proven he can trade up, and he can trade up without giving a ransom for it. So, regardless, yes, you would rather have the shiny toy, but you win 4 games and you have that top pick. You really want to talk about Dan Campbell being the coach here next year?
I can talk about it because they're separate entities to me. And Terry, that's been my point from this with minute 1. It's just, for me, and that doesn't have to be Will Anderson. Jalen Carter's out there. That's kind of becoming my shiny toy. But anyway,
I think
regardless.
The issue is if they win 4 games this year on top of 3 games last year, doesn't this show this guy is a complete nincompoop and can't do the job?
I just, again, that's a separate discussion to me to be had at the end of the year, because he's not going anywhere. So we just need to
it doesn't
understand
mean he's going
that.
somewhere, but do you want him to go somewhere? That's not the issue. The Fords do a lot of things that you know are not going to happen, but you can still debate.
WoodwardSports.com chat thread. Adam giving Neil parenting advice. LOL. That one's pretty funny to me. This is the best one though. Lewis M. Neil, you need to prepare your son for the real world. Disappointments and false hopes. Let's push for the playoffs. It's just, but there are people in that camp out there. I mean, you guys did the show, right, Sam Flannel? There's a faction of people.
Oh, they work here.
There's a faction of people that work here. Well, there's a faction of people that work here.
No, there's not. No common sense people who believe that. A lot of the knuckleheads that believe that work here, and they don't have common sense.
I need a drop of that. A lot of the knuckleheads that believe that work here.
It's true.
But it's true, though. For the shows that we rally around here, and we make sure everything is impeccable, the host of those shows talk to you about how they're going to win the division, and then they're 1-6, and that's the kind of way that stuff works. But through all of that, it's just, for me, I can't even wrap my head around people that say that. And I'm going to have a talk. I let it resonate, my son's words, and I'm going to bring this up to him when I pick him up today. And on the way home, it's going to be an educational session for him.
I have a belt if you want it.
We will try not to get to that point, but we may have to. You advocate beating it out of them, right?
No.
Is that what you're saying?
So what my dad did was he took it a step further. It was mental warfare. It was, you go get me the belt, son.
Oh, gosh.
And it was torture walking to get the belt and back, and that was enough punishment. I never got the beating. A few times, but, can't say that in 2022. They might arrest my dad. Who knows?
I used to get the switch.
Yeah, I caught the belt.
Yeah, Grandma said, go get that switch.
I caught the slipper and the belt.
Yep. I caught the belt. I caught it 5 times. And I remember all 5 times with stunning clarity. I remember the weather that day, all of it.
See, they didn't beat me because I was good all the time.
I'm sure you were, T-Foss.
I was, man.
Because you knew what was going on. What? Let me get this point, and then I'll get to the WoodwardSports.com chat thread. So I'm trying to talk to my son about it, and I will on the way home. this playoff discussion, this coach hasn't won a road game ever. Like, how do we keep going back to this, guys? Every single time we keep going. Why? Based on what?
Based on the fact that the NFC is so weak.
No.
that's-
You
that
can't.
has
See, you know
nothing
what
to do
that
with it.
is? That's Michigan fan bringing up Ohio State when we're talking about a Michigan issue. That's what that. Let's get in our. Let's worry about our house
In other words,
first.
stay out of grown folks' conversation.
No. Let's tend to our house first, okay? Before we start telling the rest of the neighborhood how to decorate their house, okay? Let's look at our house first. You have a coach that's never won a road game. They've won 4 games total in the last season plus. And all of a sudden, we're talking about ripping off 7-1 run. Based on what?
No, based on nothing. That is absurd, and especially since the fact that teams like Chicago, both New York teams, they look better than we thought. Jacksonville looks better than we thought. Even Carolina can win a few games. Where are all of those wins coming? Because that schedule that we all thought was going to be so easy down the stretch
is the toughest in the NFL so far to this point.
And that's unbelievable. And that's why you don't play the schedule game to start the season. That's why you don't just go in and pencil wins. I still think this is going to be like a 3, 4, 5 win football team. And at this point, it's time to put the tanks in the streets. But because, and I'm just bringing this up to give some perspective, because they are technically only 2 games out, I think people who want to see some growth from the rookies, who want to see Dan Campbell succeed, are thinking they're having some hope. They're having some copium. And I don't think it's healthy right now, but I'm just trying to get into their psyches.
Yeah, and Terry, I got this one for you here. On the WoodwardSports.com chat thread, Steve Lehman, and I want your response to it. You can't say you want the Lions to lose for the pick and then complain about Campbell when it happens. Never happy. And Terry, I want your response to that first.
First of all, you have to look at a bigger picture. Dan Campbell was brought here to get rid of all the clock management miscues, to get rid of the coaching mistakes, and he hasn't done that. Yeah, you can't complain about Dan Campbell and want the pick.
And that's
because
where I am.
you know, if you get the pick and if you get the talent, this man is not the one to lead them to prosperity.
And that's not an opinion. That's based on data. Like again, when I go to it and say Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell are separate, I've seen Brad Holmes deliver to the tune of the NFC Defensive Player of the Week as a Detroit Lion for the first time ever. You see what I'm saying? Like the evidence with Brad Holmes is becoming overwhelming.
I mean, before Kirby Joseph even had his coming out party, before Derek Barnes had his great game, we were still talking about guys like Amon-Ra St. Brown, Penei Sewell, Malcolm Rodriguez, even guys like Aleem McNeil, Aiden Hutchinson as hits to, like, super big hits for Brad Holmes. And with Dan Campbell, you're talking about a coach who hasn't won a road game yet. You're talking about a coach who's won 5 games in 1+ seasons. And that's just not good enough. And say Dan Campbell and the Lions do win 3 or 4 games this year. What if he ends this season as a 7-26-1 coach in 2 years? You absolutely can complain about Dan Campbell while also looking at some of Brad Holmes' wins for the future, because Dan Campbell will have shown no coach comes back from 7-26-1 in 2 seasons and magically becomes great. That just doesn't happen. There's no real precedent for it.
Well, that hurts my feelings, Flannel, so shut the hell up.
No, but Terry, it's that's where I am with it. It's but you know, I'm Team Draft Capital. I always have been, I always will be,
Yes,
because you
And
win
we
with
need
good
people
players.
like you. But I want you to close your eyes
Okay,
and answer this question honestly.
you got it.
Is the roster today better than the roster that Brad Holmes was inherited with?
100%.
Okay, was it better last year than it was the last year of Quintricia?
100%.
Then why is the record worse?
There's only one conclusion you can draw.
Conclude for me.
Coaches
Who's coaching the team?
Right.
Who's making those? Can I open my eyes or no?
Open
Not
them
yet.
up now.
Okay. Who is making these decisions in the fourth quarter of a tied game, or when you go to the locker room with a halftime lead and come back and get cooked in the second half of the game? Obviously, the team's good enough from a talent perspective to get you the lead going into halftime. What changes? The players stay the same. Those same guys that went in the tunnel come out of the tunnel. The players stay the same, right?
They do.
So you tell me then, Terry. I'll pose the same question to you. Answer your question.
I don't think they have the right man leading them. And the reason people don't want to there's two reasons people don't want to get rid of him. One, he hasn't been here long enough. You know, I need to see more than 2 years. And the third one, people just like him. He's enthusiastic. He says silly stuff. They like him.
Right.
Because when he was hired and he had his opening press conference, you just saw people saying, I'd run through a wall for this guy. You don't want to get rid of a guy like that, even if he's not winning football games. You're reluctant, at least in this town, they're reluctant to get rid of him. Now, if he'd been coaching somewhere else, Dan Campbell may have already been fired.
Sebastian says the Lions could win more games. They may be bad, but there's tons of bad teams and tons of bad football being played right now. It is grim in these NFC streets.
I mean, that's why the Lions can be 2-6 and still be thinking about playoff hopes. And one more thing before we go to break. I don't think this was a roster before the season that you would have looked at and said, this is a 4 or 5 win roster. And that is precisely the reason why I think Dan Campbell should absolutely be on the hot seat. And if the Lions end up winning 4 or 5 games at the end of the year, that you should just get rid of them at the end of the season on the field, just like they did Herm Edwards at Arizona State.